Hey, before you testified today, did you have a discussion about this case with counsel?
I did, yes.
Okay. Did he tell you I was going to ask you about this?
Yeah, he mentioned this might be brought up, just tell the truth. That's what he mentioned.
Okay. What else did he say to you?
Tell the truth, and then this might be brought up.
Why do you think he told you I was going to ask you about that?
I'm not sure why.
All right. I want to know specifically what he told you about this. What did he say specifically?
He said,
Yes. Can you point to the gentleman who told you this was going to be asked about?
That would be me, Your Honor. Back on the record on case number 21-1038, Odum v. Frey. The record should reflect the presence of the parties, counsel, all officers of the court, and the full jury. Will counsel stipulate to the correct seating of the jury?
So stipulated, Your Honor?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Busby.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Rush.
Good afternoon.
Pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, again.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Okay. How much are the defendants paying you to be here today?
Well, it's been a drawn-out process. I charge by the hour,
How much do you charge per hour?
$225, $250 an hour for this.
Okay. How much do you make in a year, on a yearly basis acting as an expert witness?
Not that much, because I don't do that much of it.
Okay. Do you not consider your investigatory work to be expert witness work?
Well, like I say, we do quite a few cases. Most of the time, there's no litigation. And where there is litigation, most of the time, it doesn't end up anywhere. So, of the work we do, I would say anywhere from 5 to 25% would be litigation work. The rest of it is just answering questions.
Okay. But your job is to investigate instances where there's a dispute of fact as to whether there's been a pesticide drift or something like that, right?
That's one of the things, yes.
And the way those issues are typically resolved is through some kind of formal legal process, right?
Eventually, there could be, yeah.
So do you think it's fair to say that you mostly don't do litigation work?
Mr. President, I'm having a really hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry. Do you think it's fair to say that most of your work doesn't involve litigation when your reports are prepared for the purpose of legal disputes?
Well, you're talking about non-litigation and legal disputes, so they're not the same thing.
Well, litigation and legal disputes are different things?
No, I thought you said not litigation.
Okay.
Legal disputes. So we do, we get involved. Sometimes there are attorneys involved, sometimes they're not. Sometimes there are lawsuits filed, sometimes they're not. So it just depends.
Okay. Have you ever been to my client's farm?
I have been by that area, but I have not been on that farm.
When were you by that area?
Today,
Okay, before that, had you ever been to my client's farm?
just by air,
Just by air?
aerial photographs.
Okay, so you weren't physically there, you were
No,
looking at
that's
photographs? Okay. So how much work do you do in Nevada?
I think the last two cases I did in Nevada had to do with defective drip tape and herbicide carryover in urine.
Okay, and what years were those cases?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Are you familiar with Nevada's basin and range environment? Do you have any particular expertise in understanding that?
I'm having a hard time hearing.
I'm sorry, are you familiar with Nevada as a basin and range environment?
The environment in Nevada for
Yeah.
agriculture, well, yeah, I mean, part of my territory when I worked for Union Oil Company was Nevada. Working in Lovelock and Harrington, around south of Carson City in that area, there's not a whole lot of agriculture.
Okay.
Mr. Busby, let me just ask this, Russ. Dr. Russ, would you like some hearing assistance that might help you to hear better?
If whatever makes things easier.
Well, we'll get it for you and you can put them on or take them off.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, sir.
How's that?
Oh, boy.
I don't want to blast you.
I can.
It's okay?
Fine.
Okay, good, good. All right, so I'm just basically asking, what's your specific experience with farming practices in Nevada?
Well, I've dealt with potatoes, onions, alfalfa,
How have you dealt with these things?
usually associated with some kind of a dispute or claim where somebody said they had crop damage caused by whatever it might be.
Do you think it's fair to say that you're a professional expert witness?
Objection argumentative.
I'll allow the question.
I don't know what that means. I do crop loss investigations, and sometimes it turns into litigation, and I become an expert witness, and because of what I do, I cover a lot of different territory.
Okay. Do people pay you to take sides in disputes about pesticide issues?
People pay me to investigate and tell them what we want.
Okay, so here you're not taking a side here, you're just giving an objective opinion, right?
As best as I can.
Did you do any independent physical examination of Ms. Odum's complaints?
I don't understand what you mean. I looked at the Department of Ag reports and the accompanying information that went along with them.
So the answer to my question is no.
I don't.
Do you know what a physical investigation is?
Well, you're talking about going out and doing it on site. No, I was not on site. This all occurred, I was brought into this after the fact.
So you just looked at a bunch of paperwork, right?
Well, I looked at a bunch of paperwork and photographs, and also library information on similar subjects, and depending on my own number of years of experience.
Have you ever examined Mr. Frey's plane?
Just photographs.
Okay. You've never personally seen it with your own eyes?
That's correct.
All right. You said in some instances that crop dusters will trim up the field, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see any evidence of trimming up the field in the records you reviewed?
It wouldn't be in the records. The only place you might see it would be a GPS track.
So the answer to my question was no.
I don't think it exists.
Okay. So isn't it true that you told the jury that that was a standard practice?
I told Jerry what was
You
this?
told the jury that that was a standard practice, did you know?
Of trimming up the field?
Yes.
It certainly can be, yes.
But you have no knowledge about whether or not Mr. Frey or anybody else for Frey Spray did that in this case, isn't that right?
Not specifically, that's correct.
All right, and can we agree that the only data you reviewed, analytical data, was that from the Nevada Department of Agriculture?
Well, I believe that there were laboratory reports that were from other than those folks that I also looked at.
Okay, what other reports did you look at?
I think there were Resco lab reports.
And do you know who those were ordered by?
You, I think.
And were those reports inconsistent with the findings of the Nevada Department of Agriculture?
Generally, no.
Okay. How do you know what pesticide, herbicide, insecticide Mr. Frey was spraying on August 31st, 2020?
I looked at the reports from the Nevada Department of Agriculture, what they had down, and I also looked at the documents, the spray reports that were provided as part of the documentation of his activities, of the sprayer's activities.
Okay. How about July 6th, 2021? How do you know what Mr. Frey was spraying on that day? Same answer?
Same answer.
Okay, and that would be the same answer for August 16th and 17th of 2021?
As far as I can recall.
And you made an unequivocal statement that Ms. Odum was not sprayed.
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
Is the sole basis for that statement, let me rephrase that, the sole basis for that statement are the tests from the Nevada Department of Agriculture and Unresco, isn't that true?
Well, that's certainly a big part of it. This foundation is that if you don't find it when you're looking for it, that's the standard basis. That's the basis that we use whenever we do analyses. It's the basis that the Department of Agriculture uses. It's the standard format as the foundation of whether or not something happened with regard to pesticide application.
Well, I'm just asking whether it's true or not, if that's your sole basis. Is it or is it not?
Well, that basis and the description provided by the plaintiff about the operations that were going on, which I find hard to believe.
Okay. So, all right. Chlorpyrifos, did I get that right?
Yep.
Oh, great, I think that's the first time.
They used to say chlorpyrifos, but it's pretty much chlorpyrifos.
And chlorpyrifos has been banned from being used on crops that humans are going to eat. Isn't that right?
Currently, that's correct.
Okay. All right. And I think you also said that the Nevada Department of Agriculture investigation was adequate, acceptable, and accurate. Am I quoting you right there?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what's the standard practice, or what do you refer to be able to understand what the standard practice is for doing investigations of pesticide draft?
Well, you would certainly want samples, talk to the people that were involved, whether it was the person that's making the complaint or the entity that's allegedly causing the problem.
Okay, but I'm asking, does anybody issue a manual or anything like that that gives people guidance as to what they should do to investigate these types of situations?
There are some guidelines as far as the state of California has guidelines. I know that the investigators are supposed to follow as best they can.
Does the EPA issue an inspection manual?
Seems to me like that there is one, yes.
Okay. Have you ever heard of the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act Inspection Manual?
Yes?
Okay. I'd like an exhibit marked next to your order.
It's gonna be number 87.
Been marked as 87 for identification?
May I approach the witness room?
Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
Oh,
All right, so have you seen this document before?
Probably.
Okay. Would you agree that it's Chapter 7 of the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act Inspection Manual?
I'm going to object, Your Honor, foundation.
I'll allow him to answer the question if you know.
I don't know what chapter it is. I mean, it's dated August 1st, 2019.
I want you to take a look at page. See the little numbers down there, Odum, and then there's a sequence of numbers and then a small digit. Okay. If you could turn to Odum 94.
Okay.
What's the title of that page?
Chapter 7, Residue Environmental Sampling.
Okay. Are you familiar with the FIFRA standards for sampling in cases of pesticide drift?
I would say generally yes. I would say it varies depending on the situation.
All right. Do you know what a control sample is?
Sample that's taken away from the area that would not be expected to be contaminated.
Are you aware of whether the Nevada Department of Agriculture collected any control samples for the investigations of my client's allegations of spray?
Well, it sounds like they collected a lot because they didn't find anything.
Do you know how many samples they collected for each incident?
No, off the top of my head.
Then how do you know they collected a lot?
Well, what I'm saying is that there were, each incident they went out, they took samples and with one exception, they found nothing. And they talk about taking a proximal distal sampling where they go furthest away.
Sir, I just asked if you know if they collected a controlled sample or not.
Well,
Do you?
it depends on whether you, how you define a control sample.
All right, take a look at page 4, please. That would be Odum-00097.
Sure.
You see where it says control sample there?
Yes,
Can you read that section to the jury?
prior to sampling, take a sample when investigating an incident site. Take the controlled sample from an area outside of the incident site that will help establish boundaries of the incident.
Okay.
And that's where I go back to the proximal distal sampling, where you move furthest
Sir, I
away.
just asked you to read that for the jury. I didn't ask another question. All right, so when you do sampling, is it common industry practice under, say, the FIFRA manual to collect samples only from the site of the alleged spray incident?
Objection, Foundation. I don't think, there's no evidence that Dr. Rush is a FIFRA inspector.
I'll allow him to answer if he knows.
What was the question again?
My question is, under the FIFRA standards, do you know, without looking at that, whether or not it's an accepted practice to only collect samples where the alleged spray occurred?
Objection again, Your Honor, Foundation.
Overrule.
I can tell you in the sampling that I'm aware of that I do and that the agencies that I do, samples will be often taken to see if there is sampling between the point of application and the point of where there's an alleged contamination.
Dr. Rush, I just asked you whether you have knowledge of the FIFRA standard. I'm not asking about your general knowledge. Do you know what the FIFRA manual requires?
I don't have this memorized, so no.
Okay, all right, take a look at page 12, which is Odum 00015.
Okay.
Okay, do you see there where it says crop damage residue incidents? I'll grab that for you. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Do you see the grid there?
Yes.
Okay. Can you read for the jury what it says right after crop damage residue incidents, the headline?
After taking controlled samples, take samples in line at approximately equal intervals from non-suspected area to the target treated area.
Okay, So that states pretty clearly that you're supposed to test the target treated area, does it not?
Yes,
And that you're supposed to take a control sample, are you not?
yes,
The Nevada Department of Agriculture didn't do either of those things, did it?
not to my knowledge.
All right. Let's take a look at the next page, Odum 106. Human exposure incidents, do you see that heading at the top there?
Yes,
Okay, does that show essentially the same thing, that you're supposed to do testing from where the human exposure incident occurred all the way back to the treatment site?
yes.
Why would you do that?
It helps you trace, possibly trace, the origin from the standpoint of, like I say, where it was applied, whether it moved, drifted, or whatever, to the point where you're looking for.
That would tell you whether or not the same pesticide that was being sprayed that day existed on the neighboring property, wouldn't it? Isn't that true?
Objection, Ms. Seats.
It's just a question of whether it's stated as true. I'll allow it.
It would tell you, it could tell you what was there. It also, like I say, in the case of my experience with chlorpyrifos, it could have been there 2 days before they sprayed or a week before they sprayed. So it doesn't tell you where it came from, it can tell you whether or not it might be
But
dead.
that's not the question that I asked you, right? I asked you, why would you do a sampling pattern this way? I said it would tell you whether or not the same pesticide was being sprayed in both areas at the same time. Isn't that true?
Objection, it assumes facts not in evidence. You would find it or not.
I'll allow the question.
Well, it doesn't tell you whether the pesticide, it doesn't tell you whether the pesticide was sprayed here and sprayed over here.
Okay, so if you found a positive test result in both places, it wouldn't tell you that it had been sprayed in both places.
That's
Improper objection, improper hypothetical.
Hypothetical questions are permitted of expert witnesses.
Overrule.
There's a big difference between something that's sprayed directly and something that moves, either drift or lift off or whatever. So finding something in one place that was sprayed someplace else does not indicate that it was sprayed somewhere else or that it even drifted.
But it can be evidence of that, can it not, Mr. Rush?
It could be, yeah, sure.
All right, so if I see a plane fly over my house and I see spray coming out of the plane and I do testing and the same chemical that was found in the plane was found on my house, that just means it's possible it came from there, right? Because it could have just hopped over from some other field from anywhere. Is that your explanation of the facts in this case, basically?
Well, I don't think those are the facts of the case.
Right. So you don't know where the chemical that was found on my client's property in the positive test from the Nevada Department of Agriculture, you don't know where that came from, isn't that true?
Nobody knows where it came from.
So it's true, right? Is it true or not, Mr. Rush?
I said, nobody knows where it came from.
What I'm saying, is it true or not? It's a yes or no question.
What is what true?
Is it true that you don't know where the chemical that was on my client's property, where it came from? You don't know that, do you?
We don't know.
Okay. But you know that the facts in this case show that Mr. Frey was flying around my client's house that day, right?
I know that he was flying in the vicinity of that house a quarter of a mile away.
All right, let me show you a video. Because you're a pilot, you should be able to tell. All right, this has been admitted as Exhibit 65.
Come up here.
It'll show up on the screen there.
Okay.
All right, I hope that works. I'm sorry, sometimes this thing takes a few times before it actually shows up. There we go. quarter mile away from my client's property?
Didn't look like it, but then again, when you turn, you're not turning right over the property you're spraying. It's common practice.
I gotta unplug this guy, I'm sorry. Did you ever take a look at the issue of where Mr. Frey's plane was flying on the dates in question?
Yeah, I mean, the fields, sure,
You're a pilot, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a GPS tracker in your plane?
I did.
Okay,
Well, it wasn't a tracker, it was a GPS unit.
okay. Does it create a log of your flight path and where you were and how high you were and all that stuff?
Mine didn't, but aerial navigators often do.
Are you aware of whether or not Mr. Frey had one of those in his plane?
No, I'm not aware of one way or the other. Would surprise me if he did.
Okay, well, I'll let you know that his pilot, Mr. Frey, testified at one of these, assuming that that's true. If you had kept that log, you know where you were that day and how high you were flying, right?
Probably, yeah.
So, given that the FIFRA standard required sampling to take place from the treatment site to my client's property, it's fair to say that what the Nevada Department of Agriculture did is inconsistent with the FIFRA standards. That's true, isn't it?
Objection, lack of foundation, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Are you aware of whether the Nevada Department of Agriculture ever tested Mr. Frey's tanks to see what he was spraying on the dates in question?
Not to my knowledge.
Are you aware of whether that's a requirement or a suggestion in the FIFRA guide?
Well, it's something that we do.
Oh, when you do an investigation, you test the tanks.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay. And why would you do that?
Because sometimes there are residues and materials other than what's being sprayed.
So, do you think it's fair to say that if you do that, you can match the chemistry of what's located to what was being sprayed that day? Is that why you do that?
Yes?
All right, but that wasn't done in this case either, was it?
Not to my knowledge.
All right. So let's take a brief look at the Nevada Department of Agriculture reports that you reviewed.
Are we done with this?
Yes. Actually, no, Judge, I'm going to go ahead and move that this be admitted to evidence.
We object, Your Honor. There's been no foundation laid that it applies to Nevada.
I'm not going to admit it this time, so I'll let you know about the issue.
Okay, Your Honor, this is a official inspection manual issued by the EPA. It's certified, I believe, it's the standard operating procedure of the Environmental Protection Agency.
Well, I mean, those would be foundational questions. And I mean,
Okay. I'll go ahead.
I take it your word that it says that it is. I just don't know.
I'm sorry, I'm going to fix that. Dr. Rush, have you seen this manual before?
Probably.
Does this look like the standard operating procedure of the US EPA, of the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Insecticide Act inspection manual?
It looks like what they, yeah, they have.
And this is a official government record that they, or government publication that they issue. And this one's dated August 1st, 2019, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any grounds to speak to authenticity of what I've shown you today?
Other than the various state departments of agriculture are not obliged to use this document.
All right, Your Honor, I move that this be admitted as Exhibit 46.
Same objection, Your Honor, foundation.
I think the foundation is laid for it to be admitted. So I will admit it.
All right. Turning back Dr. Rush, I'd like to take a look at the Nevada Department of Agriculture reports that you reviewed as part of your review of this case. And this has been admitted as Exhibit 61. All right. Do you see there where it states that, I'll pull this out for you. Mr. Lum took 2 vegetation samples from the garden.
Yes.
Does he state here on, what standard he's using to determine that 2 vegetation samples would be sufficient in this case?
Well, it's my understanding that that those 2 samples were pointed out to him as being samples that your client said were contaminated.
Okay, so let's take a look at, so the answer is he only took 2 samples and the report doesn't say why. Isn't that true?
That's true.
Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Dated August 3rd, 2021, exhibit number 60 has been admitted. All right, I'm sorry. To find the sample image. Do you see there where it says he took a gradient sample across her field from south to north, which consisted of 3 plant samples from her field?
Yes.
Okay. He says he followed NDA sampling guidelines. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you know what those NDA sampling guidelines say specifically?
Well, I don't have it memorized.
Did you review them?
I did at the time.
What do they say?
I don't recall specifically.
And isn't it true that what Mr. Van Slum did here is inconsistent with what's required by the FIFRA manual?
Objection or calls for speculation.
I'll allow a question.
It's different.
Okay, I'm just saying, is it inconsistent with the requirements of the FIFRA manual?
Well, it's different.
Okay, so how is it different?
Well, we just been through this with regard to what the FIFRA manual says that are being suggested as being sampling versus what he did.
Okay. So, I mean, what he did is not consistent with the FIFRA manual. Isn't that true?
Same objection.
No, I'm not allowed a question. But I will say that it has been asked and answered. I think,
Okay.
you
I'll
know,
move on here. Sorry.
yeah, different and consistent to me are very consistent.
All right. Exhibit 59 has also been admitted. You recognize this, right?
The one you just now have up here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And this is the last investigation that Mr. Lum did. And he collected 1 sample, right?
Yes.
And all these samples just came from my client's property, right?
Yes.
Right. So, do you think based on what you just heard, that your conclusion that my client was not sprayed, do you think that's a fair conclusion to reach based on what we just discussed about the FIFRA manual, the standards for testing, and the fact that you said that the sole basis for your claim was that the results from the Nevada Department of Agriculture?
I think it's consistent. The bedrock is you're looking for particular chemicals. If you find them, that's evidence. If you don't find them, that's evidence that it didn't happen. It's really that simple.
I'll give you a little anecdote. So, back in the 1860s, a lot of people were coming west trying to find gold, right? A lot of people passed over Virginia City, right? They didn't find any gold. But eventually a guy came along, found a lot of gold, right?
Silver.
And gold. So, that being the case, based on your logic, because they didn't find any gold in Virginia City before that lucky guy came along, it wasn't there, was it?
That doesn't make any sense.
Okay,
There's physical evidence or not.
have you ever heard the phrase, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence?
Probably.
So Carl Sagan said that, right? Do you know who he is?
I don't know who said it.
Okay. So they took one sample from the last day and didn't find anything. And you're saying it's fair to conclude that my client's allegations, seeing the plane, several eyewitnesses who say they saw stuff coming out of it. You're going to disregard all of that and say based on that one sample that what she's alleging is impossible?
They took the one sample that she directed them to take, saying that plant was specifically sprayed, and they didn't find anything. That's pretty powerful evidence that nothing happened.
Okay. So it's your testimony that in each instance for each sampling method, that's what occurred?
I didn't understand your whole question.
Okay, so for each investigation that the Nevada Department of Agriculture conducted, it's your testimony that you believe every single one of those samples was taken at the direction of my client. So,
Well, yes. I mean, she called them out and asked them to take samples.
okay, but you're testifying that she told them specifically where to sample.
She did in that case, at least according to her testimony.
But did she in every case?
I don't know that she did in every case.
Okay, but isn't that what you just told the jury?
I just told
Objection,
them.
Ms. State's testimony argumentative.
I'll sustain, I'll let you.
Okay. All right. You also said that you crop dusting yourself, you fly around the plane. And I think you said something like.
No, I did not say I was a crop duster.
Okay, what do you do?
Well, I was a pilot that flew myself around to wherever I needed to go. But I work with aerial applicators just because they're some of the people that are always involved with drift applications or drift claims.
All right, so I understand. So I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. So you're a pilot, but you're not you don't do pesticide application or any of that stuff with your plane?
That's correct.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I think you said something like, he wasn't flying towards the houses or something like that. Do you recall testifying to that during your direct?
Yes.
Let's show you another video. Sorry. Still getting used to this thing. Okay.
So where's he going? Right across Salisha's property, or close to it.
Okay. Did you withdraw your former statement based on what you just saw?
He wasn't spraying.
Okay. All right, I don't have any further questions for you. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Leath?
Briefly, Your Honor, Dr. Rush, you've never worked as a FIFRA inspector, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. No other questions, thank you, Your Honor.
Anything based on that? Mr. Busby, anything based on that?
Nothing further. Thank you.
May this witness be excused?
Yes.
Mr. Busby?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
I think there's
That exhibit.
the exhibit.
It stays there.
Your Honor, is it possible we could take a brief break before the next witness?
So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we'll take a 15-minute recess. During this recess, it is your duty not to converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with the trial. Do not communicate with anyone in any way regarding the case or its merits, either by phone, email, text, internet, or by other means. Do not read, watch, or listen to any news or media accounts or commentary about the case. Do not do any research, such as consulting dictionaries, using the internet, or using reference materials. Do not make any investigation, test the theory of the case, recreate any aspect of the case, or in any other way investigate or learn about the case on your own. Additionally, it is your duty not to form or express an opinion on any subject connected with this case until it is finally submitted to you for decision. Come back at 4:10. We'll be in recess.
All rise.
We're back on the record on case number 21. There's 1038. Odum v. Frey. The record should reflect the presence of the parties, counsel, all officers of the court, and the full jury. Will counsel stipulate to the correct seating of the jury?
Yes.
Mr. Leath, your next witness.
Yes, we call Bret Allen.
Bret Allen.
Yes.
Mr. Allen, please come. If you face the clerk, raise your right arm, take the oath of the witness. Right there.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this matter now pending before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God or under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Please be seated. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Allen. If you would please, sir, state your first name and spell your last name for the record.
First name is Bret, and A-L-L-E-N.
Thank you. And Mr. Allen, who are you employed by?
Nevada Department of Agriculture,
All right. And what is your current position?
environmental scientist I oversee our pesticide program.
All right. And how long have you been with the Nevada Department of Ag?
Since 2013, in my current position since 2018.
Okay. And can you describe to us briefly what your job responsibilities are in your current role?
I oversee our pesticide inspection staff, our pesticide licensing program, companies like Terminex that we're working, oversee our certification of restricted use pesticides for our growers, our ranchers and farmers, for those in industry members to use those chemicals. A continuing education program, enforcement, or possible education outreach as those things come up regarding pesticides.
Okay. And specifically with pesticide enforcement, is the Nevada Department of Ag the agency that investigates claims made by citizens when they believe they have been either exposed or drifted onto their property with the pesticides?
Yes.
And were you in your current role and capacity back in August of 2020?
Yes.
All right. And at that time, did you have an employee working with you at the Nevada Department of Ag named Vans Lum?
Yes.
All right. And by the way, Mr. Allen, with your role and your job responsibilities, have you received any training on pesticide enforcement?
Yes.
Can you describe that? What sort of training and education you received?
Received training through the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, through their federal programs, inspector training, basic inspector training, pesticide regulatory education programs sponsored through the EPA, those types of trainings.
Okay. And Mr. Allen, you are aware that Mr. Lum was involved in the investigation of 3 alleged incidents by Ms. Odum, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And for each of those 3 alleged incidents, Mr. Lum prepared a report and submitted that report to you.
Yes.
Okay. May I, Your Honor?
Of course.
They're not numerically in order, so let me ask you about Exhibit 61 first. If you would please, sir, take a look at that exhibit.
Okay.
And let me know when you've had a chance to just review it, basically review it.
I'm familiar with this narrative.
Okay, and looking at Exhibit 61, that is the report that Van Slum submitted to you concerning the Salisha Odum alleged incident which occurred on August 31, 2020, correct?
Correct.
And as investigated by your office?
Correct.
Okay. Take a look, sir, if you would, at Exhibit 60. Let me know when you have a chance to review it.
Yeah, I'm familiar with this narrative.
Okay, likewise, Exhibit 60 is the report prepared by Van Slum to you concerning the Salisha Odum claim of alleged incident occurring on or about July 6th of 2021, correct?
Correct, yes.
And finally, sir, take a look at Exhibit 59.
Familiar with this narrative as well.
Okay, and sir, is that the report that was prepared by Van Slum to you concerning the Salisha Odum alleged incident which occurred on or about August 17, 2021?
Yes.
Okay. And if you can, Mr. Allen, what is the reason that these types of reports get submitted from Mr. Lum to you? Like, what's the procedure within the office?
Mr. Lum, as the inspector, I delegated the investigation to Mr. Lum, and he conducted the investigation, which involved possibly taking samples, documentary photographs, looking at pesticide use records, combining all the information together and summarizing the information into a narrative, which we have right in front here. So he starting from the beginning of receiving the complaint to the very end of the findings and recommendations, summarizing the investigation, and then submitting it to me for review.
Okay, and for example, in Exhibit 61, when it is submitted to you for review, do you then review the narrative report?
I do, yes.
And do you then have any input on any recommendations of enforcement action that are set forth according to Mr. Lum?
Mr. Lum drafts everything under the finding and recommendations, which could be possible recommendations for enforcement actions. If I'm satisfied with the report, I can just leave it as is or make small edits or further communicate with Mr. Lum, just if I have questions, that's all.
Okay.
Let's leave majority of it to him.
All right, and specifically with respect to Exhibit 61, did you review and approve his report
I did,
as well as his findings and recommendations?
yes.
And was it your understanding that there was no enforcement action taken against my clients as a result of this investigation?
Yes, correct.
Same question for Exhibit 60. You reviewed and
Yes,
approved this
I did.
report?
Reviewed, minor edits, possibly reviewed the report, communicated with Mr. Lum.
And
Same thing.
approved the recommendations and findings?
Yes,
And as a result, no enforcement action against my clients as a result of this investigation?
correct.
Exhibit 59, sir?
Yep.
Same questions. As attorneys, we have to ask
That's fine.
these
Reviewed.
sometimes repetitive.
Just
Did
submitted
you,
to me, I reviewed, coordinated with Mr. Lum, and everything, yeah.
All right, and you agreed with the recommendation, the findings and recommendation from Mr. Lum?
I did, yes,
And as a result of this investigation, there's no enforcement action against my client?
correct.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Okay.
Mr. Busby?
Good afternoon, Mr. Allen. Good to see you again. Just a minute to get set up here, I'm sorry. All right, Mr. Allen, do you have any training in chemistry?
No.
Um,
Sorry, just school a while back, just a chemistry class for my major, that was no experience working with them, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I don't recall if you answered how long you've been with the Department of Ag?
Current position since 2018 as a program manager, but overall since 2013.
Okay. And I'm wondering for, we're showing Exhibit 61, which is the October 14th, 2020 report from Mr. Long. And you approved this report, right?
I did, yes.
So you approved his determination that because they found one pesticide and not the other one, that you felt Mr. Lynn was correct in finding that it was unlikely that a spray event occurred at my client's property.
Correct.
Okay, but were you aware of allegations that Mr. Frey's plane was spotted above my client's property?
That was part of the complaint, I believe, I don't have the complaint right in front of me, but I believe that was part of that.
And that was
The
the
plane was shown.
And one of the chemicals that Mr. Frey reported to you that he was spraying on the date in question was found on my client's property.
Yes.
So, did you order any additional testing of any additional samples from the area around or where my client's property was after the positive test came back?
No.
Do you know what a control test is?
Yeah, I'm familiar with those types of, yeah,
Okay,
from a different location. It's in the lab.
okay, a controlled sample.
Yes.
Okay, and why would you do a control sample?
Take a sample of the site in question and a sample off-site. Also submit that to the lab with the, knowing possibly there's nothing in that control. It's a kind of a zero defect in that sample.
I guess I'm asking, do you order that control samples be taken in some investigations?
Some, yes, I do, yeah.
But you didn't in this one?
No, sometimes I coordinate with our chemist and they have residue samples for doing those types of controls.
Okay, but a control sample was taken from the area around where the alleged incident occurred, right?
Mostly too, but I was also informed by our chemist that say that if we don't take control, they have residue sample for that type of.
Okay, that's not in the report, is it?
No, I didn't mention control in the report. I didn't take a control for this investigation.
Okay,
No, just a
that's
sample.
what I'm
No,
asking.
no control.
Okay, sorry.
No control.
Okay, and I just want you to explain for the jury, in cases where you did collect a control sample, why you did.
Why did you not?
Why you did.
Oh, why?
In a case where you did collect a control sample, not this case,
Yeah.
but another case, I want you to tell the jury why in that case you felt a control sample was appropriate.
Yeah, basically I was informed by our chemistry laboratory to take samples of the site in question and then another sample off-site, again as a control, just to compare the two samples. That was the reason for that.
Okay, and did they provide you with an explanation as to why they would want a control sample in such a circumstance?
No.
Isn't it typically the role of an investigator and not a chemist to determine what sampling is appropriate?
Yeah, usually is, yeah.
Okay. Are you familiar with the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, the FIFRA inspection manual?
I am, yes.
Do you guys use that as guidance for how to do inspections?
Yes, for federal inspections.
Okay. How about for state inspections?
We have different protocol for state authority inspections for state authority versus federal inspections or investigations.
Different authority?
Well, state authority and federal authority. If we're doing federal investigations or inspections, the FIFRA manual is what we want to follow for federal inspections.
Okay. Are you familiar with the FIFRA menu?
Yeah, I don't have it memorized, I would have to, yeah.
All right, I'd like you to take a look. If I may, I'd like to show you this.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. I'm going to move to strike and ask this exhibit be stricken from the record now that the witness has testified. They only use that for federal investigations.
Overruled, I'm not going to strike it at this point. I mean, I'll hear what he has to say and I'll let you renew the.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
All right, do you recognize this document?
Yes,
Okay, you've seen this before, right?
I have to.
Okay. Hey, before you testified today, did you have a discussion about this case with counsel for the defendant?
I did, yes.
Okay. Did he tell you I was gonna ask you about this?
Yeah, he mentioned this might be brought up, just to tell the truth. That's what he mentioned.
Okay. What else did he say to you?
Tell the truth, and then this might be brought up.
Why do you think he told you I was gonna ask you about that?
I'm not sure why.
All right. I want to know specifically what he told you about this.
He asked that I would be asked about the different man.
What did he say specifically?
He said, he asked if this current case is federal or state. This is what we follow for federal. The current investigation in question is state authority. So that's the difference, basically.
Okay.
I can't think of anything else. He just mentioned that it would, that this would be brought up in federal versus state.
And he's not your attorney, is he?
My turn? No.
Yes. Can you point to the gentleman who told you this was going to be asked about?
That would be me, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right. Do you recognize Chapter 7 on what's been Bates marked as 00094?
Yeah.
All right.
Want me to go to that page?
Do you recognize this section of the manual?
I recognize it, yes.
And what does this section of the manual describe?
Residue and environmental sample.
Okay. So, and I'd like to return to page 4.
Okay?
That's
Yes.
page 4 of the actual manual. That's Bates number 00097. Do you see control sample there? Do
Yes,
you see where it says control sample?
I do, yes.
Can you read that for the jury?
Yes, it says control sample. Prior to sampling, take a control sample when investigating an incident site. Take the control sample from an area outside of the incident site. This will help establish the boundaries of the incident.
All right, so do you know the pesticide that Mr. Frey was spraying on each date in question?
We did not learn that information until after Mr. Lum received the records.
Okay. Did you do any independent investigation of what pesticide he was spraying on the dates in question?
Just through the record audit with Mr. Frey.
So you didn't do any independent testing of where he was spraying, or his tank, or anything like that, correct?
No, it's not normally our protocol for this.
Okay. What information would you derive if you had done those tests?
Objection calls for speculation.
I'll sustain the objection. I think that the question was in an absolute versus could you or did you?
Okay. I'll say a question in the negative. Why did you not sample Mr. Frey's tank when you did your investigations of these incidents?
So our protocol is to receive the complaint immediately, as quick as we can, go to the complainant's house, possibly take samples, which we did, then find that information out through a record audit. We did not sample the tank. That's not normally anything we do. Too much time has passed, too many variables, could have cleaned the tank or used different products. I needed to use the records, which is the best tool that we have, to find out which products were used.
Could you
Then
find
I
out?
could let the
Sorry.
chemist know which exact product that they're looking for with the samples that we collected.
Could you find out which chemical they were using by testing the site that they sprayed?
Again, the best tool we have is the record audit. That tells us exactly which chemical for the laboratory to check for, rather than just a general screen overall to see what comes up.
But you could obtain physical evidence that would confirm or discount what a person was telling you they were spraying that day, right?
No, that's not our protocol. Again, we showed up to the complainant's house timely, took the physical sample and followed up with the record audit. That's how we proceeded with this
Yep.
investigation.
Mr. Allen, I'm just asking you basically, your investigator could have walked right across the street and taken a sample of the field that was being sprayed on each day in question and figured out whether what Mr. Frey was telling you was the truth, right?
Objection, assumes facts not in evidence.
Overruled on the question.
I'm not asking what your policy is, I'm just saying they could have done that, right?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Are you asking, sorry, if they could have done it, that type of thing could have happened, yes, you could have taken another sample.
And if you had done that, you would know for sure whether what Mr. Frey was telling you about what he was spraying was the truth, right?
Same objection, plus it's argumentative.
Overruled.
We're still, sorry.
You can-
Okay.
you can-
So basically, we use the records to find out which product for the chemist to check for. We're still, if we go to another field, take a sample, we're still guessing. We can't just submit a sample, pinpoint it, or tell us, like, bring a read up on what exactly is in that chemical. We need to, or in that sample.
Okay.
So we need to use the records, find out, tell the chemistry staff exactly what to look for. So then,
But isn't exactly what to look for what the applicator said they were spraying on the date in question?
Correct.
On the field that they were spraying? Okay. No, I'm just asking because there were multiple complaints against Mr. Frey, right?
yes,
And for each complaint, the Department of Agriculture went through the same basic testing regime, right?
similar, yes. We did a gradient sample on one of them, and the other ones, we asked exactly where Ms. Odum wanted us to take the sample from.
Okay.
And where she was standing when the
Were you suspicious at all that you kept on getting all these negative tests despite the complaints, the eyewitness statements about stuff coming out of the plane, the videos, the photos?
No, because the photos and the video didn't show anything to me.
Okay. Did the photos and the videos show Mr. Frey's plane going over residential properties?
Some of the video and the photo showed a plane far up in the air. I don't know exactly who's.
Right. Let me show you a video, please. Show my password, is it? Mr. Allen, do you know what Mr. Frey's plane looks like?
No, I would need to, it's been a little while. I think it's a yellow below winged aircraft.
Okay. How many times have you
Not
seen
yellow.
that?
It's, sorry, not yellow. There's another aerial applicator that I work with in Nevada. Last time I think I was out there, I think it's a silver one, below winged aircraft where the spray nozzles are attached to.
Okay. Actually, let me show you something else first. This has been admitted as Exhibit 36. Mr. Allen, does that look like Mr. Frey's plane?
Well, again, I have to probably be informed if that is or isn't. It's definitely a crop duster. I'm just not for sure if that's 100% Mr. Frey's plane, just because I haven't seen his.
Okay. This is Exhibit 21. That's just maybe take a look at this.
Why is he going right across Salisha's property, or close to it?
Yeah.
Have you seen this video before?
I believe so. It's been a little bit.
Do you know which complaint that he was associated with?
I would have to be reminded of which complaint that was.
Do you recall a complaint that was filed by Mr. Wayne Anderson?
Sorry, who? George Anderson?
Wayne Anderson? Or George Wayne
Is it the
Anderson?
same thing? Yes, I do.
Same guy. What did you do in response to that complaint?
We followed up with that complaint as well. We went out to his property, took samples, and nothing was detected.
Okay. So you see there where he says he smelled, there was a smell in the air afterwards?
I see where you wrote that, correct, yes.
What do you think that is?
He said there's a smell in the air afterwards.
What do you think the smell was?
Objection calls for speculation.
No clue. Okay. How about Ms. Odum? Did she complain about smell too?
I believe she did, yes.
All right. How many samples did you take of Mr. Anderson's property?
I don't have the narrative in front of me. If you'll recall.
Did you take any control samples for Mr. Allen's property?
I do not recall if we took control samples there. We just took samples on site.
Okay. Do you recall how many samples you took after each alleged incident?
You know, the one with the gradient, that was 3 samples. Another incident with, I believe the lilac and the pepper, so that's 2. And then I have to look up the narrative for the other one.
Okay. Can you describe to the jury what a gradient sample is?
Yeah, a gradient sample is trying to determine if drift occurred, starting away from where the suspected exposure occurred, working toward it, taking samples to determine if, again, if drift occurred, if there was chemical, so from lowest concentration toward the highest. So you want to say if spray happened over here in this area, you want to take some samples leading up to that highest concentration to see if that drift occurred and from where it occurred from.
Do you know the particular pesticide that was found on Ms. Odum's property after the August 31st, 2020 incident?
Referring to the pyrophos detection of .009?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So are you familiar with that pesticide?
Somewhat, if, in order to familiar, there's so many chemicals, I would definitely have to research more, but I'm a little familiar with pyrophos.
Okay. And once again, you're not a chemist, right?
Correct.
All right. Who's the chemist at the Department of Agriculture?
Our lead chemist, his name is Dr. Jen Zong.
And what's his job?
He's our lead chemist, chemist 4 in the Department of Agriculture.
Does he conduct investigations?
No,
I'm sorry?
no,
Okay. So the investigatory team is your department, he's like the lab.
correct.
You're
Yes.
CSI, you're the cops, he's, the lab guy, right?
Correct.
Okay. He never goes out into the field, right?
Correct.
So he never sees, the situation where samples are taken or any of that, he just takes them and tests them and gives you the results.
Correct.
All right. No further questions? Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Leath?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Zhang, is it last name Z-H-A-N-G?
Correct, yes, he's our lead chemist, yes.
Great. You had Exhibit 87 up there, the EPA stamp on the bottom.
Yes,
Okay. This doesn't apply to your state investigations, only federal investigations, correct?
correct. If we do federal inspections, we must follow this FIFRA manual.
All right, thank you. No other questions?
Mr. Busby, anything based on that?
Just one brief question, Your Honor. Do you dispute any of the methods described in the FIFRA manual for doing investigations of alleged overspray incidents, credit or direct application?
No, I don't dispute.
So these are good, solid investigative techniques to figure out the truth of the matter when there's an alleged incident of overspray or pesticide exposure or something.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks, sir. Nothing further, Judge. Thank you.
Anything based on that?
No, Your Honor, thank you. Can this witness be excused?
Mr. Busby?
Yes.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to approach and just make sure we still have the exhibits. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes, 59, 60, 61, and 87.
Can you mind just give them back to the clerk?
Yep, good idea.
442. Do we,
We're at a natural pause for the defense, Your Honor, if that's okay.
sure. So let's talk a little bit about scheduling tomorrow. I'll address the jury and I'll also address counsel because on occasion, the rest of my job, besides doing trials, we have other things that happen. There are certain things that happen that trigger time deadlines, and so tomorrow at 11:30, I have to have a mandatory hearing because there were, well, they're confidential cases, but when something happens, I have to have a hearing within 72 hours. And so I'd like to break tomorrow at 11:30 for lunch, and I'll do my hearing through the lunch hour, and then we'll come back, probably about the same time, probably 1:30, maybe 1. But just so you can plan your days, and that way I can make sure I comply with my obligations in that case and still keep this case moving along. I'm happy, I don't know exactly what we have tomorrow. I'm happy to start at 8:30 if it's not inconvenient for anyone, or I'm happy to stay at 9 if we think 9.
9 is fine, Your Honor, in my opinion.
Very well, then we'll just, we'll recess for the evening and come back at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Ladies and gentlemen, the jury here admonished not to converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with the trial. Do not communicate with anyone in any way regarding the case or its merits, either by phone, email, text, internet, or other means. Do not read, watch, or listen to any news or media accounts or commentary about the case. Do not do any research, such as consulting dictionaries, using the internet, or using reference materials. Do not make any investigation, test the theory of the case, recreate any aspect of the case, or in any other way investigate or learn about the case on your own. Additionally, it is your duty not to form or express an opinion on each subject connected with the case until it is finally submitted to you. You're directed to return to the jury room tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. where we'll resume the case. Thank you. Be in recess.
All rise.
False alarm. We're back on the record on case number 21-1038, Odum v. Frey. The record should reflect the presence of the parties, counsel, and all officers of the court. We're meeting outside the presence of the jury. Counsel's requested that we put something on the record.
Yes, Your Honor. I am renewing my objection to Exhibit 87.
And that's the federal regulations?
Yes, based on the witness's testimony. I believe reference to it should be stricken from the record.
And Mr. Busby?
The fact that it applies in federal investigations doesn't mean it should be stricken from the record. It's a tool to analyze the investigative methods of the Department of Agriculture with their expert witness and Mr. Allen. There's been no presentation of the state standard, and Mr. Allen admitted that he had no qualms for being a secret regarding the case described in the
Sure. I'm going to deny the request to strike it. There's ample testimony for each side to make argument about inferences that should be drawn or applicability, closing arguments. But my one concern that I think was cleared up based on the examination was the potential confusion about applicability. That I think there's testimony that gives each side the opportunity to make arguments to the jury that they can draw whatever inferences that you think is appropriate.
And Your Honor,
Yeah.
thank you for the ruling. And I'm going to reserve the opportunity to perhaps introduce other portions of that manual if needed.
Yeah, the manual is disclosed in my pre-trial disclosures.
Correct.
As an exhibit, and that's been disclosed months and months ago in discovery. It's not a surprise.
No, absolutely, it's not. It's just that we're looking at chapter 7 as opposed to the 700 and something pages that have been produced.
It's very useful. Might have some reading tonight.
Exactly. Thank you, Your Honor, that's all.
Thank you.
And then, if we're off the record, I'm just gonna,
We can go up there.
so we,
Good morning. We're back on the record on case number 21-1038, Odum v. Frey. The record should reflect the presence of the parties, all counsel, all officers of the court, and the full jury. Will counsel stipulate to the correct seating of the jury?
So stipulated, right?
yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Leath, your next witness?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Lynn Weaver.
He's right outside. Go right up to the witness stand.
Mr. Weaver, if you come up here to the witness stand. If you face the clerk and raise your right arm and take the oath of a witness, if you'd stand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this matter now pending before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God or under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Please be seated. Mr. Leath?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Weaver, how are you?
Morning, good.
Sir, if you would please state your name and spell your first and last full name for the record.
My name is Lyndon Weaver, Lyndon Weaver.
Thank you. And sir, we're here in this trial. You're a witness for the defense, and you understand that the reason you're here is because of the lawsuit that's been brought by Ms. Odum?
Understood.
Okay. And before we start talking about the details of the alleged incidents, I'd like if you could, sir, please tell me, where do you currently work?
So I'm currently employed with SkyWest Airlines as a first officer on a 70-seat CRJ 900.
Okay. And where are you stationed at it?
I'm based in Salt Lake City. I fly out of the Salt Lake City International Airport.
Okay. And is this a job that you've been interested in pursuing?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And why is that?
It's always been, flying has always been a dream of mine. It's something I've dreamed of doing for years. And this is part of that dream.
And what are they having you do at SkyWest?
So as a first officer, I'm second in command of the aircraft. So the decisions that I make are, I'm not directly under command of the captain. I'm responsible for the aircraft and the decisions that are made.
Okay. And how long have you been doing this now?
I've been employed with SkyWest Airlines since December the 15th, I believe.
Okay. So,
Of this past year.
all right. So coming up on about 6 months or so, or a
Yes,
little bit longer. And before that, you were working for Frey Spray.
That is correct.
All right. And what were you doing there?
I was the pilot for Frey Spray, the chemical applicator.
Okay. Flying a crop duster.
Correct.
All right. And how long were you working at Frey Spray?
So I started in around about February of 2018. So until October of this past year, a couple of years.
Okay. And during that time when you were working for Frey, were you involved in crop dusting, spraying fields?
Very much so.
All right. Can you give me an estimate as to, maybe how many hours you flew, or how many acres, per year or per month that you would spray?
I don't know an acre number, but I do know that I have well over 1,000 hours of actual spray time.
Okay. And where did you work before that?
So I had my own business as a chemical applicator with a ground sprayer. So I've been in agriculture all my life, and then around about 2013, I started my own business doing chemical application with a tractor style sprayer.
Okay. And even with the ground excuse me, the ground sprayer, you would still have to, for example, get the chemicals, add the water, make a tank mix,
Yes, sir,
adjust the nozzles and boom for the spray application.
absolutely.
Only the difference would be you pull that rig behind a tractor as opposed to flying a crop duster.
Correct.
And where are you from originally?
I was born in northern Indiana,
Okay.
and I came to Nevada in 2012.
What part of Nevada?
That was Eureka, Nevada, over in Diamond Valley.
Okay. And what sort of training and experience did you have in pesticide applications first, and then we'll talk about crop dusting.
So the training starts with the Nevada Department of Agriculture. There's a ton of material on their website. There's written exams that have to be gone through before you even get licensed as an apprentice. And then you have to work as an apprentice for a couple of years before you can go on to be a primary principal as a spray operation owner.
Okay. And do you receive any sort of like certificates or license?
Yes.
And what are, can you describe this?
It's a little plastic card. It looks kind of like a driver's license, has my picture on it. And it basically says that I'm certified to apply economic poisons.
Okay. And that's what pesticides are?
Pesticides, yes, sir.
All right. And then what about to get your certificate for flying? What did you have to do?
So that is a very extensive process. The flight training, it takes a long time. You have to have at least 40 hours in an airplane just to receive a private license. And then from there, that's only to fly an airplane for fun, right? You have to have a commercial license in order to fly for hire, which is 250 hours of flying an airplane at a minimum, and then you're issued a commercial license. Plus, there's also extra training for doing this specialized kind of work.
And that would be the crop dusting work?
Correct.
Okay. And does that training also include things such as careful operation of a crop duster, avoiding drift,
Absolutely.
learning to read and follow pesticide labels, things like that?
Absolutely.
And you were successful at obtaining all of those?
Yes, sir. I had a really good handle on reading and following pesticide labels because my ground business, I already had a lot of the training required, so that carried over into the airplane spray inside of it.
All right, good. Now, Mr. Weaver, and again, I just kind of want to ask a couple of kind of more basic type of questions. But when you're going to be doing a job as a crop duster, are you, if you're spraying a field, who are you spraying it for? Is that like a customer or?
Yeah, so typically the farmer who owns the field, he's the one with the problem, call it an invasion of bugs, weeds, whatever it might be. If he does nothing, he loses his crop. Cows go hungry, so he calls us because obviously he has a problem. We could go in there and do it for him, so it would be for the farmer, yes.
Okay, and we've learned about this, but just to make sure we're on the same page and talking the same language, pesticides is kind of the big category, but then underneath that, you can have different types of pesticides. For example, insecticides,
That is correct.
and what would they do?
So typically, your pesticides are for killing bugs like unwanted bugs, pests. A herbicide would be for killing weeds.
Okay. And when you're setting up for a job, do you fly the crop duster out of what location?
Typically, we fly out of, in this area, we fly out of Fallon Municipal Airport.
Okay, the airstrip out here?
Yes, sir.
All right. And if you're gonna be setting up a job to go spray a customer's field, where will you mix up the chemicals with water? Where does that take place?
Takes place, we have a location at the airport where we mix up the chemicals and load the airplane and fuel the airplane.
Okay. So when it's loaded, what does that mean?
When it's loaded, it means you've got all the correct chemicals in there, including your drift retardant to keep the chemicals from drifting. It also means you've done some homework before you load the airplane, because you don't load the airplane without knowing that you can go out and do the job safely and effectively. So having the airplane loaded means that you've looked at the weather, you've looked at the winds, you've looked at all the surrounding areas around the target field, and it means you're ready to go.
And why are the winds important?
Winds are very important because if you make an application while it's settling down onto the crop, if the wind is strong, it could blow it out of your target area.
Okay, is that referred to as drift?
That would be referred to as drift.
And does the crop duster have some sort of like a tank or hopper that you then load this liquid tank mix into?
Yep, it has a specialized, called a hopper, where the solution goes into.
Okay. And then I was going to show you briefly just a couple of photos of the crop duster, okay?
Certainly.
Is this Brian? Do I need to do anything today?
You're gonna use the document camera?
Yeah. Thank you. Cool, thanks. Mr. Weaver, these are gonna show up on the screen there. Just taking a look here, autofocus. I believe. Thank you.
Stay with it for a second.
Okay, perfect. All right, Mr. Weaver. Is this crop duster?
Yes, sir, it is.
This is Exhibit 36, and is this actually one of the Frey spray crop dusters?
Yes, I've flown this airplane many times.
All right. And this is Exhibit 37. That's the wing.
Yes, that would be the right wing.
And what is that apparatus under the wing?
That is the spray boom. It's part of the spray system on the airplane.
Okay. And just if you can briefly describe, how does the crop duster liquid in the tank get into the boom?
Sure. So from the hopper, there's an outlet on the hopper. It comes down through a filter system into the pump, which is driven by a hydraulic motor from the engine. After the pump, it goes from a valve which you control from the cockpit, the on and off valve, and from there it's tees out into the spray boom, which is what you're seeing underneath the wing.
All right. And then is the on-off that you're referring to, is that different than the switch that you would use once you get to the field to start spraying?
The on-off, that is what you move to start spraying.
Okay, all right.
You drop down in the field, push it forward, and the spray comes on.
All right, and then when you are leaving the field, what do you do?
You pull it back and shut it off before you leave the field.
Okay, and why is that?
because you don't want spray going all over the place.
Okay,
This is the field is the target, that's the only thing we're spraying.
okay. Let me show you Exhibit 38. Is that a close-up of what?
That is the spray nozzle.
And is it attached to the boom?
Yes, sir.
Just to, this is 39, but it's a little out of focus. So how about, this is Exhibit 40. Can you describe what that is?
That is one of the spray nozzles, so it's got a little diaphragm there. It takes a bit of pressure to turn the nozzle on.
Okay. And so that's where the spray comes out of?
Exactly, that is, the spray comes out the little pointy end on the backside.
And here's 41. By scale, it looks like that's a quarter. So the nozzle's not a gigantic thing, is it?
No, it's pretty small.
Yeah. And then let me go back to this one to make sure. This is 37. The boom has, what, several nozzles?
Yeah, it looks like about 7, 8, there's about 8 nozzles on each side, plus one in the middle.
But they don't go all the way out to the end of the wing.
No, and that's really important because if it did go all the way out to the wing, there's a wingtip vortice that comes out and swirls around, so we have to keep the booms back from the wingtips so that the wingtip vortice doesn't swirl the spray and make it blow around.
Okay. And sir, when you're, so you have the tank loaded with the tank mix of chemicals and water. You check the weather, you go out to the customer's field to do the spraying. And you talked about how you would, once you're in position, you would turn the spray on.
Yes, sir.
But before you get in position, tell us, how does that work? I mean, do you have to start kind of high and go low, right, to get to the field, or explain the process of once you're there and ready to begin your spraying?
So, as per the label, we can't be spraying more than 10 feet above the ground. That's one of the requirements, is do not release the material more than 10 feet above the ground. However, we can't be turning 10 feet above the ground. So our speed down in the field is typically 110 to 120 miles per hour. So we drop down, spray comes on, we spray across the field, spray turns off, and we pull out. Now, the problem is we're still going 120 miles an hour. So we have to fly out, turn around, and get lined up for a pass, another pass which is 50 feet away from the pass we just laid down. We can't be turning around inside the field because we have to be down close to the ground while we're in the target field.
Okay. And why is it important to get turned around and lined up for your next pass?
So we fly a swath every 50 feet. And with the equipment we have in the airplane, it's very, very accurate. We fly that swath within plus or minus 2 inches as we're flying across the field. So this is very accurate. And it takes a little bit to get the airplane lined up for that swath.
Okay. And a swath is just that width where the spray is coming out, targeted towards the field?
Yes, sir.
And is it good to have uniform coverage across the field for purposes of whatever, for example, bug you're trying to control?
Uniform coverage is the goal.
And
We want to kill everybody.
okay. And so that's why you have to have the precision with the swaths?
Exactly.
But that does sometimes take some lining up to get you in position?
Yes, sir.
All right. And that lining up will occur outside of the perimeter of the field itself?
Exactly. The lining up occurs outside the field boundaries so that once you're in the field boundary, you can fly straight and true across the field, plus or minus an inch or two.
And does sometimes that lining up and making those turns involve going over residential areas?
Certainly.
And what do you do to be careful?
We do not turn over residential areas. If there's a lot of houses, we fly past the houses, turn around, and then come back straight across the houses.
Okay. At times though, you end up turning sometimes over the houses?
We do our best to mitigate that, but we also try and stay away from the houses as much as possible.
Okay. And when, in addition to houses, what other areas do you try to avoid turning over? Schools, for example, or?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Schools, like, there's tons of things we try to avoid.
All right. And while you're spraying the field, are you also looking out for any people, obstacles, things like that that might come into the field?
Absolutely.
And why, obviously, but explain why that's important.
So a lot of times these chemicals will have a safe entry period where they require you to wait, say, 12 or 24 hours before someone's allowed back into the field, because these chemicals are a little bit dangerous.
Sure.
So we have to take steps to not poison a person or a non-target animal.
And when you're done making the pass and you would be outside of the field boundaries, making your turn, you might be going over some residential houses or schools or whatnot, is your spray system shut off?
Absolutely, it's shut off before we leave the field.
Okay. And is there some mechanism that you're familiar with that shuts it down?
Certainly.
What is that?
Yeah, it's the spray handle that you turn on when you enter the field is the same thing that shuts it off before you leave the field.
And then is there some pressurized way that you know that prevents any spray from coming out while you're shut off?
Certainly, so when you drop down into the field, spray comes on, your eyes go over to the pressure gauge, you've got positive pressure. When that handle goes off, pressure goes down to 0, and you know spray is off. Also, by looking out the window, you can verify that there's no spray coming out of the nozzles.
Okay, so you can see it as well.
Yes, sir.
And I believe we've had some other witnesses talk about this, but the nozzles are designed to spray the droplets, and then the droplets are large enough where they just stay within the target field.
Right, so you want a nice sized droplet, because the smaller your droplet is, if it's like a fine mist, it has a tendency to move more with the wind. However, if you have a nice solid droplet that falls onto the plant, it mitigates the chance of drifting onto a non-target crop or site.
Okay. And explain how, can you explain how you handle jobs that require more than one tank load?
Certainly, so there's many jobs require more than one tank load, so typically what we'll do, we'll fill up the airplane, we'll go out and spray maybe 5 or 6 passes until the airplane is empty, and we'll pull out of the field, spray comes off before we leave the field, and we head back to the airport and fill the airplane up again. It's called ferrying empty or loaded. So we fly back and forth with the airplane loaded or empty, but the spray is off.
Okay. And I think I may have said shuttling, but it's where you're basically ferrying back and forth to the airstrip, so you can take on a new load.
Yes, sir.
And while you're doing that ferrying, you make sure that the spray is always off.
Absolutely.
And in fact, if you're, well, no. I guess the reason why you would need to make multiple loads is because you're putting out a certain amount of gallons per acre. Is that-
Objection, leading.
Yeah, can you explain why you might need multiple loads?
So each chemical requires a certain gallons per acre of carrier, including, which means water. So say take a certain chemical, for instance, it requires 5 gallons to the acre. So if we're spraying 100 acres, the airplane only holds about 160 gallons. So with 150 gallons, we can only do about 30 acres. So we have to go back, fill the airplane up again, go back to the field a second and a third time in order to cover 100 acres.
Thank you. Now, when you're performing this job, do you, in the process, or do you use a GPS?
I do, yes.
Can you explain the purpose of the GPS?
The purpose of the GPS is when you drop down into the field, you can mark a spot on one end of the field, mark a spot on the other end of the field, and it'll draw a line in between those two marks. The GPS will then populate a swath every 50 feet, and it'll give you a line to fly straight across the field. Not only does it give you guidance across the field, it will also show you the swaths that have already been sprayed. So if you go back to the airport to get another load, when you come back, you will know what swaths have already been sprayed, and you can start right in where you left off.
And that GPS data, how is that handled on a day-to-day basis?
Typically, the data, it gets deleted at the end of the day.
And why is that?
With all that new data that's being created by spraying across the field and all the information that you're putting in, it tends to clog up the system, and it's unnecessary information because we'll never use it again, so we just delete it at the end of the day.
Okay. And the, I know you said before you start the job, you check the wind. What do you do during the job to continue to monitor the weather?
So I am always monitoring the winds when I'm up spraying, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. If there's a car driving down on a dirt road, you can watch the dust as it's moving or not moving. If the dust stays right over the road, you know there's no wind. You can look down at all the houses. A lot of people, patriotic people, have flags in their backyards. Those flags are a very good wind indicator.
Okay. Any other steps that you commonly use?
We check the wind every time we go back to the airport as well.
Okay. So in between while you're reloading?
Yep, every load we look at the wind.
And then when you're performing a job at a field, do you sometimes not spray the entire field?
Objection.
Sustained.
All right. Well, what's a buffer?
A buffer zone is required by the label, first of all, but to describe a buffer zone, it's like it's a part of the edge of the field that you don't spray to be even more cautious about drift, so you're not drifting on people or non-target crops.
Okay. And you're familiar with how to leave buffers, and you've done that in your career?
Many times, many times.
Now, I want to turn your attention to the allegations of Ms. Odum's case. And you understand that she has made a claim of exposure concerning an application that was performed on August 31st of 2020.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you were the pilot for that customer spray job there at the Rambling River Ranch?
I was the pilot.
And generally speaking, where is that farm located?
That is located out west of town. It's also known as the Bell Ranch.
Okay. And are some of the major cross streets 50 and Robertson?
That is correct.
All right. I'm going to show you what we've marked as Exhibit 62. Now, I'll zoom in a moment, okay? But, and you can point on your screen, I believe, but Mr. Weaver, Exhibit 62, does this depict that Bell Ranch?
Yes, sir.
Can you just point to where it is on the screen?
Yeah, so the Bell Ranch, and it includes this little trapezoid-shaped field on the left. Then there's a longer field in the center, and then there's a little short one over here on the right.
Are you able to touch the screen and just, yep. So that's the Bell Ranch there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, go ahead and just kind of outline it for us. All right. And that's the job that you're working on August 31st of 2020?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall what were the pesticides that were being sprayed?
Just off of memory, I know one of them was Yuma.
Okay.
A product called Yuma.
All right. Let me show you. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Let me show you Exhibit 32. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is Exhibit 32?
That looks like the job ticket that was filled out for that particular customer.
Okay, and what were the insecticides being sprayed?
Looks like Yuma was the one and Fast Tac was the second one, is a mix of two pesticides.
All right, and when you say,
Mr. Weaver, would you just move that microphone closer to you, just so we make sure? Yeah, thank you.
and when you say a mix, is that referred to as a tank mix?
Yes, sir.
All right. And what do you recall as far as the weather that day?
It was a beautiful day. It was a nice summer morning. The no temperature inversion, and the winds were light, looks like 2 miles an hour out of the northeast.
Okay, so if you can just kind of point an arrow from the northeast to show us the direction of the wind.
Sure. So the wind was coming from this direction,
All right, and that's when you started the job?
and that was when I started the job. So we were spraying east and west, so the airplane would follow this pattern right here.
All right. Thank you. So when you say that pattern, that's the passes that you're making?
Yes, sir.
And those would be the 50-foot swaths?
Correct.
And so you would be going back and forth, back and forth.
That is correct.
And you recall, or are you able to tell from the job ticket how many loads this may have taken?
Looks like 584 acres. So that would have been a lot of loads, but there was also some, on the other side of Highway 50, there was some ground that was included with this.
Okay. So you would have made multiple trips back and forth to the airstrip that morning as well?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. And does your job ticket note what the wind conditions were like when you finished?
Finishing the job, the winds were, looks like 3 miles an hour out of the east, which would be from this direction right here.
All right. And Mr. Weaver, you understand the allegations. Do you believe you were able to spray only within the target field that day?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any recollection of spraying any of the residences or property outside of the target field?
I do not.
Did you?
No.
Now I'm gonna clear this screen.
John?
Oh, sorry. Did you need this?
So wait,
No.
I'm sorry to interrupt, I was gonna request a copy of that, but it's clear, so that's my chance.
You want him to replicate it?
If you could, please.
Yeah, go ahead and replicate that if you don't mind.
So starting the job, the winds were out of the northeast.
Yep.
Finishing the job, the winds were out of the east.
Yep.
3 miles per hour.
Go ahead and make the border of the field again. And then generally show us your passes like you had it before.
Certainly.
How's that, counsel?
Wonderful.
Okay.
I think we can do a screenshot.
Well, I'm gonna add one more thing. So, did you leave a buffer in this job?
I did.
Can you show us with the up and down line where the buffer was? A vertical line?
A vertical line?
Yeah, just on this screen, make a vertical line where the buffer was.
Leading,
Oh,
that's.
Or maybe just ask them to draw a line on the,
I was just trying to have a line that was different and but that's fine.
do we have the ability to do different colors with this?
We go.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Brian.
I have to experiment for just a second.
All right. So, can you go ahead and draw the buffer?
Sure.
What's the green?
That's still green. That's the buffer.
Okay. Now can we save an image of that?
Ms. Clerk, do you have the ability to save it?
I can go ask the court administrator. I don't think we've ever done it before,
Let's,
but I'll inquire.
I don't have a card that doesn't have it.
Your Honor, I can speed things up by just taking a photo of it here, and then I can use it.
Let's see, I think the court administrator will be right here. Let's see if we can do it. I think we can print it out.
Can we get rid of this green arrow so we don't confuse anyone?
No, just leave it now. I won't touch it. Your Honor, I can ask another question
Yeah.
while we have the screen up.
Go ahead, just no one erase it until we,
Don't touch the screen. May I approach?
of course.
This is Exhibit 42. Have you seen that before?
I have, yes, this is the job recommendation for
Okay,
that particular application.
all right. Go ahead.
We're unaware of any way to save it to an external source if the parties wanted to take a picture of it, if that would be possible.
We'll let both sides. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Of course.
Just take, you'll share that with me.
Of course.
All right, thank you. And so in your experience, what is the purpose of a recommendation like that?
Well, we don't just go out and spray chemicals all over the place willy-nilly, so this is actually a recommendation from a licensed crop advisor to apply pesticide to that field for the purpose of terminating the insects that you see in this picture.
Okay. Those are the photos at the end of that document?
Yes.
All right. And you mentioned using a drift reducing agent. Is that included in that recommendation?
It is, yes. It's called an interlock, and he has it listed in here as 4 ounces to the acre.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna clear the screen. Mr. Weaver, I'm gonna show you Exhibit 33. So let's set these aside. Do you recognize Exhibit 33?
I do, yes.
And what is that?
That is a job ticket for a job we were doing out by Diversion Dam on July the 5th of 2021.
Okay, so different location, different year.
Totally different location, different year, yes.
And you were the pilot for that job?
I was the pilot.
And it's beyond this is beyond the screen image here in Exhibit 62, but the diversion dam area is, I believe I may have said 5, but probably 10 miles west of Fallon.
10 miles west, yes.
Okay, and what was the product that was being used for that job?
That was a product called glyphosate, which is a herbicide, it's a weed killer.
Okay, and the do you remember any of the details of that particular job?
You mean as far as,
Well, how many loads did it take?
oh, how many loads did it take? 250, we do about 40 acres. So 10, more than 10 loads for sure.
Okay, and so were you doing the same process you described earlier by spraying the field out by diversion dam and then ferrying back to the airstrip?
That is correct. I was working off of Fallon Municipal Airport, so 10 times I have to ferry out to Diversion Dam with a loaded airplane, spray out the load on the fields I was spraying out there, come back to the airport empty for another load.
All right, and I'm gonna, while you were ferrying loads, did you fly in an area that you see here on this image?
I certainly passed by the area on this image. I do know that every time I went through here, I was north of the railroad track, which is right here.
Show us the railroad track.
It's in the magenta line.
Okay. And so if, do you see just below the magenta line that street called Arvilla?
Yes, sir.
All right, so you would have been north of that, but is it possible you could have, on some of the ferrying loads, been close to Arvilla?
No, I was north of the railroad track. I made sure I was north of the railroad track every time I went by here. That railroad track is like one of the major landmarks that I use when ferrying through this area.
Okay,
And the other thing is, when we're ferrying an airplane loaded or empty, the spray is in the off position. We're not spraying all the way out to Diversion Dam because by the time we got there, the airplane would be empty.
okay. And on either July 5th or July 6th of 21, do you see that field that's to the north of the railroad tracks?
Yes, sir.
I understand from this case that's been referred to as the Dalton Lowry fields.
Okay.
On either July 5th or July 6th of 21, were you spraying those fields, or that field?
No, absolutely not.
So all of the spraying that you conducted on either July 5th or July 6th, 21 was out of those, what's the name of that customer again?
It was Jason Storm.
Okay, so the Jason Storm fields.
Yes, sir.
All right. And while you were ferrying back and forth to the Jason Storm fields, at any point in time, did you spray this residential area that's to the south of the railroad tracks?
No. Not only did I not spray the field, I also didn't fly over that residential area because I was north of the railroad tracks.
All right. Mr. Weaver, let me approach.
Of course.
If you would, do you recall what the weather conditions were like on that July 5th or 6th during that Jason storm spray?
Yeah, so at the start of the job, the winds were out of the southwest at 4 miles per hour, west-southwest, and at the end of the job, the winds were from the west at 5.
Okay. All right. And in your experience, are those conditions where you were able to comply with the label requirements for avoiding drift?
Certainly, in fact, most chemical labels will not permit spraying with winds totally calm. They do want a little bit of movement. However, the top of the wind restriction is somewhere around 10 miles per hour.
Mr. Weaver, thank you very much. Those are all the questions I have.